autonomy and agency. In other words, saying no is not necessarily an encouraged aspect of childhood. Why? Because that's an inconvenience for mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever's taking care of you, because they likely already have a plan for you as a child, and no wasn't in the equation.
Because if you are taking full autonomy and saying no and captaining your own life, you now have to take responsibility if you fail.
For all the consequences that lie in after the no.
Exactly.
Conscious couples, business partners, and individuals, welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and relationship expertise to help you consistently cultivate the most magnificent relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges. We'll help you have the courage to be your authentic self, communicate effectively, and constructively resolve conflict.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching, speaking, podcasting, and hosting live events with conscious couples all over the world, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we.
Conscious couples and individuals, welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. Today we have episode 237. Are you and your partner living a hell yes life? Before we jump into this episode, I want to remind everyone why we're here. We're here to grow together, not apart. We're here to improve your intimate relationship from the inside out. That is the only reason we're here. Important work. Sweetheart, ladies first, what is your intention for this particular episode?
So my intention for the listeners for this particular episode is to make sure that we are creating space for a hell yes life and helping our listeners remove any clutter that's getting in the way of that very intention.
So we did a Relationship Talks virtual event. We've got a big slide up here on the back screen. The permission slip that Emilia opened the event with was to say no to the good, so that there's room for the hell yes. So I want to start with this. 21st century, 26 years into it, 2026. The amount of distractions, I said this at the event, I said, shout out to everyone who came, by the way. I said, I can play more games on my phone right now than all of the games that ever existed on all the consoles when I was a kid.
Wild.
And that's just one distraction. Video games, gambling, you click, click, gamble. Click, click, shop. Click, click. And so I have this list of 10 distractions that I use at Next Level University. If you want it, reach out. But it's just basically the 10 kryptonite things that I think hold people back from reaching their full potential. And a lot of times your intimate partner has friends, family, colleagues that bring in drama or bring in bullshit or bring in crap that's not useful. And so you and I, since we met almost 7 years ago, have really done this cycle that you put up on the presentation, which is we make a decision and then we do an experience review. And in that experience review, we decide what we really loved about it and what we will never do again. And we've been curating our films list. We've been curating what we do and don't eat. We've been curating where we do and don't go. Most importantly, we've been curating who we do and don't spend time with. So that's what this episode is about, is to give the goods of the Relationship Talks event of, if it's not a hell yes, then it should be a no, because if it's not a hell yes, you're going to get stuck in maybe, and you're going to be on the fence. And I say nothing grows on the fence.
Right, exactly. So you and I shared this story in the Relationship Talks event, and I want to bring it into this episode as the essence around what this whole conversation is about. Everything that matters and nothing that doesn't. Yes. Alan and I, 7 years ago, we were in Newport, Rhode Island for a wedding. Glitz and glam, all that happy jazz. And I had brought Alan as my date, and Alan and I ended up meeting this couple who was in the elevator, and we had met. We're at the same wedding, same person, whatever. It was all great. They were like the cutest couple, and probably in their 50s, overwhelmingly oozing with like love for each other. Still just that joy. And met them, had a good time. Later, we realized that we ended up being sat right next to each other at this wedding. And as always, I asked the question, so what's the secret? Because what we realized in between when we had met them and by the time we actually had the conversation and the question to ask, just like every single wedding, when you are 5 years together, you're on the dance floor. Everyone stays until the couple that has been together the longest is the only one on the dance floor. And they had stayed on the dance floor for 35 years. So that question, what's your secret to this, the 35 years of marriage, that's huge. Now, what they said to us was everything that matters and nothing that doesn't. And that ultimately, that story has rippled into why we're talking about this right now, because, well, now we understand in hindsight, they were probably drunk and it was a fleeting comment that sounded very wise in essence. What that has brought is this curation process that Alan is talking about making sure that only the essentials, the hell yeses, be it food, people, experiences, things that we enjoy, have it be a hell yes. And that is why saying no to the good or kind of things that are on the fence, get rid of that. Live a hell yes life. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of decisions to be able to be at that level. And so we want to make sure that every couple joining us today has their own room, has their own essence with that story at the heart of it as to why it's important to live a hell yes life. Because far too many people, and we said this in the event, last thing I'll say, it doesn't take you much to look around you and see an unhappy couple. As a matter of fact, you don't have to look too far.
I would say the majority of couples are probably, what I'll say is very few couples are wildly fulfilled.
Yeah.
Like very few.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And growing up, I saw a lot of that. So everything that matters and nothing that doesn't has become our relationship mantra.
Yeah.
We didn't plan on that. We just hung on to that phrase and we've used that phrase.
Took it and ran with it.
Constantly. Coming up on 7 years in October. Mm-hmm. So everything that matters and nothing that doesn't. There's a couple more I want to bring in. So Essentialism is a book by Gregory McKeown. It's not about the book. It's not about the author. It's about the concept. Mm-hmm. The book is good. I recommend everyone reads it. It's one of my top 5. It's on my bookshelf in my office. But the disciplined pursuit of less but better. That's the quote. The disciplined pursuit of less but better. You messaged me earlier today saying, hey, this makes this a no for me. Do you agree? And I said 100% it's a no for me. So saying no to the decent things or decent ideas gives you the space to use your time, effort, and money on the hell yeses, right? And that's how you create a great life. If I could go back in time, I would tell Alan, like, you're hardworking, you're strategic, you're intelligent, you're doing great. You need to learn how to say no, sir.
Oh, yeah.
You need to learn how to say no, sir. ASAP, Rocky, now.
And feel good about
it. So that's what we're going to teach all of you. And so we have discussion question 1 each. Mm-hmm. My discussion question is, why do people struggle so much with saying no? Because I do believe the older and wiser I become, the more important it is to be discerning. There's too many options. Mm-hmm. There's too many freaking options. There's too many options. Why do people struggle to say no? Let's answer that.
So one of the biggest things that we named at the event that I'm going to bring in a different slice here, because you can only get the goodies fully at the event, but one of the biggest things we have discovered, and you will look at the research and it will show you this all over, and honestly, you can go try this and you'll feel it in real time. When you say no, ultimately, you inherently have this feeling of guilt or shame. Either saying no is like the bad or wrong thing to do socially. It's selfish. Or I'm a bad person for saying no to this invitation, this event, whatever it is. So usually there's that emotion combined directly with the saying no process. Mm-hmm. So that's number one. And if we're saying no and we have those feelings associated with it, the likelihood of us actually moving forward and feeling good about that no is going to be very, very small. Yeah. I mean, how many times have you been celebrated for saying no?
Whoa.
How many times?
Never.
Right.
Maybe never.
Right. Socially, it's not quote
I
unquote
would say
acceptable.
socially. Yeah.
Right.
Never socially. I have by you.
Right.
I want to jump in here for a second. So, how many times have you been celebrated for saying no? Almost none in the social world.
Yeah.
None in like the peer group sense. Okay. Family, extended. However, it's not just that. You've also been ridiculed for saying no.
Exactly.
And so, for example, I didn't want to go to a friend's wedding that was across the country. Mm-hmm. Still to this day, that destroyed my friendship. And I sent a long audio explaining why. And I just should have said, honestly, I'm not interested, but thank you. Mm-hmm. And in hindsight, it's just like, yeah, I guess. Why do you think your wedding should be the center of my universe? I don't believe mine should be. Mm. And I do think that it's that. It's people are so fearful of rejection on the other end of a no that when you do reject them, they get very upset and they will either abandon you, villainize you, attack you, give you the silent treatment. Yeah, it's really not a good experience.
Yeah.
For those of you out here who get really offended when other people say no to you, it's time to grow up. It's time to grow up. Like, the world doesn't revolve around your birthday or your wedding or your whatever. Like, there are bigger problems in the world that need to be focused on. And I always felt like it was frustrating because I never really do the guilt trip thing.
Well, that was the second question that I was going to ask. So how many times you get celebrated for saying no? The second question was, how many times do you feel like you get slain for saying no?
Yeah.
Which is what you're describing.
Yeah.
So what we mean by this and how it pertains to the question ultimately is because usually when you say no, there's literally research that supports this. Say no with a quote unquote justifiable cause in the other person's consciousness of why you have to say no.
In other words, a reason that they will understand.
And
based
socially
on their
accept
frame of
without slaying you or without making you a villain, in other words.
Yes.
And so bringing that forward, though, is so important because when we say no and we don't have a quote unquote reason, we then go into the meaning making of who we are and what this means about us as a bad person, etc. So all this comes down to is the stories that we tell ourselves, and saying no without a justifiable cause in other people's reasons or in their minds leads us to an kind of leading down the storytelling of, well, maybe we will have fun. Well, maybe we should kind of go. It could be this, that, and then leads to bigger stories.
So it's all avoiding the discomfort, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so to bring this back to the core here, why do people struggle so much with saying no? The other piece of this is childhood. So when you're a kid, you don't get to say no. So can we go into that briefly?
Yeah, I mean, autonomy and agency, in other words, saying no is not necessarily an encouraged aspect of childhood. Why? Because that's an inconvenience for mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever's taking care of you, because they likely already have a plan for you as a child, and no wasn't in the equation.
So when you're a kid and you're dependent on your parents, you have to go with what they want. So you get conditioned over time that you must say yes to these things, because as a kid, you actually don't have a choice a lot of the time. Like, you have to go to school, you have to. And then I think one of the things that I found really fascinating is when I went from corporate to entrepreneurship, it was very interesting to be like, the entire day is now mine. There's no bell and you have to be in class. There's no report card. There's no one looking over my shoulder. Like, my whole future is entirely up to me. Two sides of that coin. On one side, that's awesome. On the other side is, that's a lot of responsibility. So if I'm not productive, it's basically because of me. And so I think that's the other piece of it too, is it's easier to relinquish responsibility and not have to make the hard choices for your own future. So that because if you are taking full autonomy and saying no and captaining your own life, you now have to take responsibility if you fail.
For all the consequences that lie in after the no.
Exactly. Okay, so what's your discussion question?
So my discussion revolves around the conversation that we had around relationship clutter. Because when we're trying to live a hell yes life, per the intention, what gets in the way of that? So my question for you is, what have you found to be the underlying root cause of people's relationship clutter? What they welcome in, et cetera, et cetera. If it's not the no that we already talked about, what is it?
I think it is the no we already talked about. But the other piece of it, I would say, is, and this is something that had a hard time articulating to certain clients. I didn't realize, again, where I was on the bell curve of this, but I think people have some pretty intense hoarding tendencies. I think that they attach a lot of emotion to material things and to events and experiences. And I'm not against that necessarily, but it's been really alarming to see how much junk people have. And I'm not saying this out of nowhere. I have 42 clients that I coach individually, and I coach them deeply, and it's behind the scenes work. Like, there's more in than out. And this goes back to the saying no thing. You shop more than you donate. You bring more into the house than you get out of the house. And everything's supposed to be cyclical, right? If I always shop, if I always bring more into the house than we ever get out, eventually the house will be just completely overtaken, right? And so I think that's one of the things that I would say is people attach a lot of emotional significance to material things and to maybe relationships that aren't good for them.
Okay. So on the topic of relationship clutter, to take this one layer deep, what do you think is one of the biggest aspects of relationship clutter that we've seen in our work with couples that is important to share with any audience that's listening?
What do you mean by relationship clutter?
So in the event, what we talked about was the different types of relationship clutter, which one of them we've already mentioned is the social invitations that come into people's lives. In other words, all the horseshit, the things that are preventing you from living a hell yes life. Yes, I can go with my friends instead of actually doing what I care about. We talked about social clutter. So like, for example, the digital invites, you mentioned the books of essentialism to make sure that, there's not a ton of stuff coming into your digital feed. The physical clutter is something that you just mentioned. And why this matters is because what we shared in the event is the more clutter that we have in our relationships, let's say you have some high school drama with your friends and all of a sudden it starts taking up emotional bandwidth within the relationship. Hypothetical, right?
Had a little something recently.
Things like that, at the end of the day, that takes up the bandwidth that is contributing to overwhelm that we are seeing in couples.
So what are the categories, love? Okay, so you've got
emotional, social, physical, digital.
Okay. I know. You're going a little fast. Yeah, you're going a little fast. Okay, go through them a little slower.
Okay, emotional.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Do you want me to define them?
No, I think you're just at a very high tempo. I'm trying to
emotional,
regulate.
Social. Physical.
Yeah.
And digital.
Do you have somewhere to be? Or I'm kidding.
It's a game.
You always do. Yeah. Okay. Always. So what are the categories again? So social, you have emotional. Physical, and then digital. Okay, nice. Okay, so digital would be your YouTube feed, your email subscriptions. Let's go through more of them. Okay, the social would be the barbecues and the invites and the parties and the birthdays and all that stuff. Okay, and then the physical would be like the stuff you buy, right? The food that you buy, the knickknacks, paddywhacks is what I call them that you buy.
I always love the conversations that you and I have, the things that you own you.
Yeah.
Right. So like, for example, we have plenty of people that we can think of that have multiple properties, multiple cars, multiple things, boats, etc.
But now you got to take care of them.
Now you have to take care of them. Hence they own you with their maintenance schedule. So physical is anything from the small knickknack, paddywhacks, for lack of better words, to the things that are quote unquote bigger in terms of investments that take your quote unquote time and consciousness and overwhelm you with their maintenance.
And let's go down the last one and we'll get out of here. So intellectual. To me, I think the most important thing is to protect what goes into your mind. So the TED Talks that you do and don't watch, the books that you do and don't read. I always use an example of a client of mine. He's reading Lord of the Rings. And I said, brother, that has nothing to do with your goals. He's like, Lord of the Rings, man, that's about life. And I'm like, I know, I love it. Trust me, I love it. No, we need to read a book that's relevant, right? So a lot of people, I know, I knew you'd laugh at that. It's important, like, why that book?
You need an angle or a discussion question or hone it in.
Why that book, right? Why that movie? And so the things, that's what I would say, and I'll end with that, is yes, you protect what you say yes and no to in terms of all these things, especially what you allow into your brain. Do you start the day every day with social media feeds? I have a client I was just on with earlier, and she went from being 3 hours a day of TikTok to now 30 minutes to now no TikTok. And her life's going to get so much better because TikTok is designed to just be the most outrageous dopamine stuff. And it's none of that is like deeply meaningful information. So I'm going to kick the question to you, and then we're going to roll. So I would have you answer your own question, and then we'll get out of here.
I think the biggest one that I've observably seen within conscious couples that is hard for them to admit to, which is why I kind of want to give that permission slip, is the social clutter, the social and emotional clutter. In other words, the yeses that you say to other people, where you're honestly, if you were to do a full body check-in, it's not a hell yes.
Nice.
You go ahead and say yes.
How do you do a full body check-in?
Full body check-in, literally, it's like a top to bottom scan, as if you were like a laser scanning top to bottom, I guess, but it happens so quick over time with repetition. You get better at it. If your body is not like opened by the invitation
for someone
socially,
brand new, how would they start? Do you just take deep breaths and,
I mean, you could, but I want you to for someone that's just starting, slow down the time to where you get an invitation to where you say yes.
Yeah.
You're not going to immediately check in with your body awareness. I mean, that's usually developed over time between the invitation and your answer. So delay the response there. And then when you delay that response, observe what is happening inside your body, right? Is it opening and expanding, or is it like, feels like a drudge fest?
So I to give a tangible example here, when I have a certain person on my calendar, every now and then it would be like, ugh. But there's other people on my calendar where it's like, I'm so pumped.
Let's go.
Now, what about the caveat where you actually do I need to say this. I said this at the event too. I have to say this. What about the reluctance from challenge? Because there's some things that people don't want to do that are actually important to do.
Sure.
So I mentioned the Conscious Couples podcast is something that I believe is important. It's not something that I necessarily want to do. I'm a coach who also podcasts. I want to coach more. I'm willing to podcast more. And that doesn't mean that I really have like a full body, yay, I can't wait to do this episode on this uncomfortable topic, right? So how do you know the difference between I should do this for my growth versus I should say no to this? I always say the one that takes the most courage is usually the right answer.
And I think that that's a great qualifier, because ultimately what we're talking about is distress tolerance, and what you are tolerating, if it is because it's tolerance based on a specific goal. So for example, as I was with a client earlier who literally knows she's avoiding some really deep, difficult emotional grief.
Right.
And she's avoiding and avoiding in a specific tendency that she can observe, and that's not helpful for her. So she's unwilling to tolerate that avoidance because it disconnects her from her long-term goals.
How does she tell the difference between that and something that should be a no?
A should be a no. Ultimately, it's not tied to her goals. Like, her goals are the qualifier of whether or not, if it isn't going to help her with her goals, either short-term or long-term, that is something that she should not be doing, because the goals
growth or goal.
Yes.
Right. So if it's aligned with growth, goals, and dreams.
In other words, who she aspires to become. She doesn't aspire to be someone that runs away from her emotions. So therefore, if that's the aspiration, that's the North Star for her.
Got it.
And she's avoiding that, then you're not tolerating it. Like, that's not a good thing.
So last piece, summarize the whole thing is, when do you say yes? When do you say no? You say no when it's not aligned with your growth, not aligned with your goals, and not aligned with your dreams. You say yes when it is. And it's up to each of you to figure out what is and is not a hell yes. Anything you want to add before we go?
You figure that out through deep introspection, values, beliefs, aspirations. And if you struggle with that, reach out to someone that can help you. Okay. And that's where we have RTC.
Okay. So we have a Relationship Talks virtual event?
Yes, we have a Relationship Talks virtual event. So just like this one, only we're going to be talking about the fundamental pillars of love. So this will be on September 16th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The link to register will be in the show notes. Alan and I have developed and wash, rinse, repeat the most basic fundamentals of love and the pillars that actually support that, nurture that, and make sure that love is growing together, not apart. So join us for that.
So over the last 7 years of coaching couples, we do have a pretty good understanding now of who we would bet on. And it's based on these pillars, essentially. If you have these 7 pillars to hold up the castle, metaphorically, you will be successful if you continue to improve them. And if you don't have these 7 pillars, you will not be successful long-term with this partner. You can hold up the building with 4 or 5 of them, but you definitely can't with 2 of them. So I love the pillar thing. I have pillars for fitness. I have pillars for health, wealth, and love. So this is the love one. We hope that you join us. Also, Relationship Talks Coaching Inside Out. program. So I talk often now about coaching is way more valuable than podcasting. Podcasting is important, but it's not close. This is where the real work is done. So if you're ready for the real work, come to those virtual events for sure, but also book a free session with Emilia and I. It's going to be life-changing. This is what we do. This is all we do. I have 7,400 coaching sessions. You have thousands. So we have a combined 10,000 hours of helping people flourish in health, wealth, and love, particularly love in this case. So the link will be in the show notes for that. As always, it's not about you or me. It's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please check the show notes to connect with us and say hello on social media.
If you and your partner resonated with this episode, please leave us a 5-star review at the link in the show notes and share this with someone you love. Until next time, it's not about you or me, it's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.